So what words pop out at you? Individual words or even short phrases? For me, meditation was something that popped out at me that I wanted to focus on. But was there a word that, I can read it through again if you want, or you can read it through. Is there a word that kind of stuck out to you just now? So keep that in your mind. And we're going to go through, you're going to let me have a bit of a grammar moment. We're going to talk about parallelism in Hebrew poetry. There's a lot of repetition. The concept of following a law or being in a way. So parallelism, is anyone familiar with this in poetry, what parallelism is? Parallelism is a prominent feature in Hebrew poetry that enhances the meaning and impact of a psalm. Parallelism involves a repetition or contrast of ideas within the same verse or between verses. There's a few different examples of parallelism in this psalm. Starting in, let's look at verse 25. We see an example of something called synonymous parallelism. It involves the repetition or restatement of the same or similar ideas, but in different words. In this passage, we see it in verse 25 when he says, "My soul clings to the dust, revive me according to your word." We see the synonymous parallelism is evident in the repetition of the concept of revival. The psalmist's soul clings to dust, which is synonymous with the need for revival. It leads to the need for revival. The revival is sought, quote, "according to your word," which is emphasizing the source of renewal. In verse 26, we see where it says, "I told of my ways and you answered me. Teach me your statutes." This verse exhibits synonymous parallelism in the relationship between the psalmist's ways and God's statutes. The act of telling one's ways and seeking God's teaching conveys a similar idea of seeking divine guidance and understanding. Another example of parallelism is something called antithetical parallelism. We see that it involves the presentation of contrasting or opposing ideas within the parallel lines. So in this passage, if you look at verse 29, where it says, "Remove from me the way of falsehood and graciously grant me your law." Antithetical parallelism, Meredith, is evident in the contrast between the way of falsehood and God's law. The psalmist desires the removal of falsehood and the gracious granting of God's law, highlighting a sharp distinction between error and truth. And my third geek moment for grammar today is emblematic parallelism. That's using one line to provide an image or symbol that illustrates the idea in the other line. So we see that in verse 32, where it says, "I run in the way of your commandments when you enlarge my heart." So the image of running away in commandments is emblematic of a heart being enlarged by God. The act of running illustrates the commitment to following God's commands, and the enlarged heart represents God's transformative work in the psalmist. We have talked before about what a work of art Psalm 119 is, and hats off, chapeau, to the people that translated this and made it beautiful in English, because that was a feat as well. I take for granted the fact that I have the Bible in a language I can read, and I have the Bible written beautifully and accurately in a language that I can read. In the original Hebrew, this was like wowza, just like blew people's minds, and it still does in English, which is so neat to me. So the psalmist is using all these different, this literary device of parallelism really a lot through the entire psalm, but I'm looking this week right here at this selection about trying to take either contrasting images to prove a point or idea after idea that's the same but expressed differently. One commentator, because I was thinking about this class, like, am I going to get in here and repeat myself every week? We should love scripture and read it, yes. Like, that's what I feel like I'm saying every week. But this commentator said, "It is so far from being a tedious repetition of the same things," talking about this psalm, "it's so far from being a tedious repetition of the same things, as it may seem to those who look over it cursorily," with a cursory glance, we might say, "that if we duly meditate upon it, we shall find almost every verse has a new thought and something in it very lively, which was very challenging for my simple little brain, because I had sat back and been like, it all says the same thing for a billion verses. No, it doesn't. I have to sit and look at it. It is a work of art, and there's a reason it is, which was very inspiring to me when I was starting to write this lesson. Yes, ma'am?
I can't help but think when you're saying this that, Hebrews talks about how the word is alive,
Mm-hmm.
it's living and active. And so as you read through and you say, it feels like it's repetitious or it feels like it's saying the same thing over again, but if you look at it from the perspective of it's alive,
Yeah.
it's penetrating our heart, and it's penetrating, it's a living, active, it's something we can't even comprehend how it's living and active, and so it's more than just words on a page.
Mm-hmm. And I have to be honest with myself. Every time I have sat with scripture and prayed beforehand, God, let this change me, whether I notice it today or in 10 years, let this reading here affect me somehow. It does. And I have to humble myself in that way and acknowledge, like, this is more than a book. There's a reason the Bible is more special than anything else. It's a reason it's such a great gift. And that's it, You don't age out of the Bible. You don't hit a certain reading level and you're good. So, and that's exactly why I really want to focus on meditation for today. I think, we're about to be at that point anyways, but meditation is something that, scriptural meditation, as in like meditating on the scriptures, is something that has really helped me to give the Bible the space in my life it needs to transform me. So, kind of doing looking at verse 25 through 27, where it says, "My soul clings to the dust. Give me life according to your word. When I told of my ways, you answered me. Teach me your statutes. Make me understand the ways of your precepts, and I will meditate on your wondrous works." Here, there's a longing for understanding. The psalmist has a deep desire for God's guidance and for his understanding. I sat back and thought about this, and I thought, do I long for spiritual understanding? Do I long for scriptural understanding? Do I anguish over this the way the psalmist does? I feel like often my own longing ends in self-defeat, or it has in the past, because I felt, I did not feel empowered to read scripture and understand, or read scripture and feel inspired. I would read scripture and say, I need someone to explain this every single time. And I think I felt intimidated by the understanding of people around me, because I would read it and come and feel a certain way or have a certain observation, and the people around me seemed to have like way smarter observations about it. Like they noticed things I didn't, or they had takeaways I didn't. And I always thought, I guess I don't understand this. I for a very long time, I didn't read the Bible by myself. I was like, what's the point? This was in high school, early college. I was like, what is the point? Like, clearly I need someone to always teach this to me. And that's not how the Bible operates. It is meant to be studied together, but it's also meant to be benefited. You can benefit from it by yourself. So this longing for spiritual understanding kind of got stopped short for me, with lots of insults towards myself and really insulting scripture, because scripture wasn't made, you don't have to have a Bible degree to understand it. My 5-year-old understands scriptural truths. She'll let you know. Like, she understands things. She can hear a Bible verse and she can come to a conclusion about it that makes sense at her 5-year-old level and will flourish and grow as she gets older. And that's what it's meant for, I believe. I think that because I really did, like, I wouldn't read the Bible by myself for years, because I just was like, I can't even trust what I think. I don't come up with the right things. I don't notice enough. I don't give it due justice and what it's trying to say. So I'm just going to wait for someone to explain it to me. I think this was in part a product of my childhood and certain circumstances in my home, ways children were spoken to a lot of times. But I also think it's just part of being young in the faith, being a new Christian. I think sometimes new Christians, I'm speaking from my experience. My experience as a new Christian was I was like, well, I did all this wrong for so long. How do I know I'm going to do this right? I think it's a major reason why we should be very mindful in tending to people that are new Christians. It is very good to hug them and write them a card after they are baptized. That is a big deal. It is very good to celebrate that with them. And thus begins their most vulnerable state where they are most likely to be attacked by the adversary. And I feel that's what was happening to me for a long time. I think Satan delighted in me thinking I was too stupid to read the Bible for a very long time. And I am so thankful that God, not Satan, has put people in my life since then that both gently showed me how to read scripture, but also said, who do you think you are? Like the Bible's made for everyone. You insult other people when you say you can't read it too. And so anyways, has anyone else ever, what's been your experience with your level of spiritual longing? Like this psalmist is over here. My soul clings to dust. Give me life according to your word. Teach me your statutes. Make me understand your precepts. I mean, these are big demands. Have you ever felt hungry or thirsty or desperate or angry or towards just wanting to be able to understand something? What's been your experience with that? Mine, I felt like an idiot, like I'm not able to understand it for a long time.
I think it kind of goes back to the idea of starting with milk and moving up to meat, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an okay place to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. But the fact that you mature beyond that,
Yeah.
you don't let yourself regret where you were
Yeah.
towards where you are. As long as you're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was in a holding pattern for a long time, and I didn't recognize it as such. I was in survival mode for a long time, and I don't think it was the time to grow in Bible facts and Bible knowledge, and more just the time to really feel cared for. But I couldn't know that until you're through it, And so,
The rest in His Word.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
We're all going to have those seasons as well.
And I do wish I had been able to acknowledge that and soak that up instead of be frustrated with myself. But I'm thankful on this end to know that that it can come in waves. And I also know now how to ask for help spiritually, and I did not know how to do that then. Like, I'm thankful that I have a spouse that I can sit down with and say pretty outrageous stuff. And he doesn't say, heretic, you're sleeping on the porch. Because we don't have a porch. But he says, okay. And then we sit down and we talk about it. And by the end of it, I have benefited because I have community. Community in my spouse, community in this room. Yeah. I think you don't stop growing because you hit a certain point. I understand it all. You keep going forever. So I want to now focus on the role of meditation. Yes, ma'am.
I have to say one more thing.
Yes.
When I look at Lauren, I studied for years, and I mean studied hard
Mm-hmm.
for years and years, and up at 4 a.m. to study and read, and knows a lot, can get up and recite his long passages of scripture without looking at them, and
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody that knows him would say he's and when anybody gets up to speak, he's taking notes. He's taking notes and
Forever student.
Huh?
He's a forever student.
He's a forever student,
Yeah.
and will be the first to acknowledge, I haven't figured this out yet, or I have a lot to learn, or I still have a lot of growing to do, or whatever. And it just, to me, it just goes along with the idea that, we really don't arrive until we're there.
Yeah.
With Christ.
Yeah. I'm trying to model that for my children, that even Mama is a forever student of the Bible. You're not just learning from Mama. Mama's still learning from God too. We learn from God together. We've started a Bible study with Not Consumed called Obey, and we do it before her schoolwork a couple mornings a week. And I think that's been really helpful because I want to teach her that adults are learning too, because she knows I go to my class here, but she's in her class. And that's fine, because I understand things on a level in here. She understands things on her level in there, and we're both learning. But I like that we now learn at home as a family too, and I think that's been really helpful. And I'm hoping that she grows up excited to learn, not intimidated to learn about the Bible. Yeah, Nat.
I was thinking, it's not quite, I'm not sure if this is quite what you were asking, but I think for me, my biggest level of frustration in understanding was understanding that I can read the Bible anytime, and I didn't even come to this conclusion per se, I'm still not there very well, until about 2 years ago, of like, I would feel guilty reading the Bible if I wasn't in a good headspace.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was really hard for me to ever even get close to reading it because I never felt like I was in a good headspace
Oh,
to read it.
yeah.
Like if I'm not in a good headspace, like I'm doing the Bible a disservice. But that's so far from true, and you're never gonna get there if you're not reading it anyway.
Right. David's pretty angry when he wrote half of his songs, so.
2 years ago, it was actually Ian Keller. We were out at camp and he was leading a lesson, and he said, no matter how I'm feeling every day, I read 4 chapters of the Bible somewhere because I'm not changing myself reading the Bible, it's changing me.
Yeah.
And it's reading me.
And no other book is like that. A self-help
Yeah.
book, you have to, it's so, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and I took so much inspiration from that and knowing like, even like just him saying that was like, you know, the Bible's reading me every time I read it.
Mhm.
And maybe even if I'm not in a good place, it's gonna read that and God's gonna reach me.
Yeah,
through that,
yeah.
through communicating with him. And that has totally changed my view of like, oh, I need to be in a good headspace. I need to be able to be like studying and be in this place of like, I can focus on it. Like sometimes you can't be there. Sometimes you have days where you can't be in that headspace.
Mhm.
And that's okay. But you need to be in his word every day, even if you read it and it just goes over
Yep.
your head, that's still going into your heart somewhere.
Yeah, making it a
That's still
practice.
reaching you on some level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt intimidated in the past because I don't have a wood grain table with a steaming hot cup of coffee and some cute like hand lettering and then a photo of it to post somewhere. Like Bible time, not that that's bad, but I was like, that's what Bible time looks like. That's what it should be. And I am not in a phase of life where that's possible because there's stuff all over my kitchen table. And I don't normally get to drink my coffee while it's hot unless I'm going to work. It's kind of backwards, but stuff like that. And so I think I've talked before about how when I was in therapy in Nashville, my therapist was like, there are many ways. It was a Christian therapist I went and saw, and she's like, scripture intake can look like a lot of things, and when you make it one thing, you will never succeed. She said, so let's get creative. How can we take the scripture in? And I took a class in high school called that would have been cool. In college called Spiritual Disciplines. I went to Freed Hardeman for a while. And I took a class called Spiritual Disciplines where we went through all the different spiritual disciplines, what they are, why we do them, and then how to do them. How do you fast in this modern world? You still don't eat. There's not like a shortcut. But anyways, and I want to kind of talk about meditating on scripture as a next point, kind of a point to end on.
Just a quick.
Yes, please do.
I
Yeah.
think that's one of the beauties of the Psalms. The Psalms are screaming sometimes. Even this verse, even this section of verses, my soul clings to the dust. He's in like despair.
Yeah. What's that word? He says something about sorrow, and I really felt that. It says my soul melts away for sorrow.
Yeah, he's not in a good headspace, but he's going to God's word, and you see that time and again in the Psalms. They're angry, they're frustrated, but he's always going to God with it. And
Yeah.
it goes back to the last verse in the previous section where it says, "Your testimonies are my delight; they are my counselors." It's taking all of that to God. It's taking that. Okay, Lord, I'm not there. Please use this somehow.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Bible anyway. And we have that example, and I think that's one of the powers, the beautiful power of the Psalms.
Yeah.
Is that we see that.
Well, and David's called a man after God's own heart.
Exactly.
And he says lots of stuff. And I touched on this a few classes ago, how I've had a lot of really angry, really hateful, kind of violent desires towards someone I would really put as my enemy, right? Like, and how do I deal with that? Oh my word, why do I have those thoughts? I can't tell God I have those thoughts. He is the only person I think I should tell those thoughts to sometimes. And that's when Jeffrey said, have you read the Psalms? Have you heard what David wanted for his enemies? And at the end he said, but God, you're good and you're just and you will do the right thing. And so I have started just saying, this is what my heart wants for this. And I know I can't trust my heart. I have a sticker on the back of my Kindle, you guys. I've also started reading the Bible on my Kindle, because you can do that. And so I can bring it to her. It says, don't follow your heart on the back of it. Jeremiah 17:9, which is a really good reminder for me, because in a culture that's like, follow your heart, listen to your heart. No. Your heart is so deceitful. Your heart is so wrong. It is so fickle. And I'm thankful I don't have to follow my heart, because it changes every day. I can follow something that's consistent, that I can adhere to. It's not a standard I have to make up on my own or set the rules for. Yes. So looking at meditation. Meditation is understood to be a lot of different things. It's been adapted by a lot of different faith groups, a lot of different religions, a lot of different cultures. The concept itself, what is your understanding of meditation generally? If you're meditating on something, what are you doing?
Thinking about consumed by thought.
Mm-hmm.
Letting go.
Letting go.
Yes. Letting go of thoughts.
So how do you meditate? How do you meditate? How do you?
Breathing.
Mm-hmm. So centering.
Yes.
Okay.
Grounding.
So when I took that spiritual disciplines class, we had at least two textbooks by a man named Donald Whitney, and I invite you to get a pen out or your phone out and write this down. Donald Whitney wrote a book called Praying the Bible. If you've been in our apartment so far, you've seen the books, you've seen the bookshelves, and then you've seen my husband come up the stairs with more boxes of books, and I said, I haven't ordered the bookshelves yet. He said, well, I know you're going to, and I said, but they're not here yet. And so we have boxes and boxes of books over the floor still. And I looked through all of them, and I could not find this book because I was going to bring it in. It's called Praying the Bible by Donald Whitney. It's just about praying through the Bible. He has a bigger book about spiritual disciplines. It's like a seminal book having to do with spiritual disciplines. It is very good, very comprehensive. But my favorite one was Praying the Bible. It's because it was shorter and very practical for me. And in my spiritual disciplines class, we would do this thing. We went to the Psalms. We would open the Psalm as a class. We would begin with kind of trying to focus and center ourselves, like she was saying, Heather was saying, just really trying to give ourselves permission to have space to be in Scripture, which allowed me to kind of say, okay, the grocery list is scooting over here for a minute. It will be there when I'm done. It always waits, And it was an individual practice. We would pray before we started reading, and we would pray to ask God to really open our hearts and kind of push down our pride and let me be receptive to whatever his Bible was going to say. And then to myself, I would read the scripture and I would go line by line. And if I had any kind of thought or any kind of question or any kind of feeling, I would stop and pray about it immediately. And then I would resume and read. And if I had any kind of thought or any kind of question for God, I would stop and pray to him about it and then keep reading. And this was a practical, easy, everyone can do it meditation on Scripture. It was an interactive meditation on Scripture. Praying the Scriptures is meditating the Scriptures. It's sitting with it, sitting with God with it, being intentional, emptying my mind of other things to fill it with this thing. I went to a meditation class in Anchorage when we lived up here, like 100 years ago, like 7 years ago. We lived up here, and I went to a 7:30 a.m. yoga and meditation class, and it was before I had children. So I was like up and gone, and I looked so cute with my hair up and had hot coffee. Those were the days. And I went to yoga, and she was it was not like a highly specific religious practice. It was just a very general, because she wanted people to benefit from it and not feel boxed in by it, if that makes sense. And the thing I learned from that was how to actually calm my mind. And but I never learned and empty it, but I never learned to fill it. A lot of meditation in the Eastern world is just emptying your mind, empty, and leave it empty. And that is very helpful In certain instances, they teach you similar things when you are having anxiety or panic attacks. You will have a practitioner teach you how to ground and empty so that your body can recover, and then you move forward and fill. The thing I think is different about Christian meditation specifically is we empty to fill. We empty to pour something in. And I was thankful for that practice that taught me how to empty, because at the time I had such a difficult anxiety problem, I was not able to do that. And I learned how to do that in that class, but for years I thought, I'm just empty though. Like what do we put back in? Because the anxiety will get back in there. It does every day. And so learning how to pray and meditate through scriptures was a gift. And we did this in class, and it was private. We didn't get up and this is what I meditated on, and this is what I asked God about. Like, you could if you wanted, but he said that's not an expectation because this is a private personal practice. Study you can do with other people, and meditating you can do alongside people, but really his goal was for us to learn how to do that by ourselves. And so Praying Through Scripture by Donald Whitney is a teensy little book, and it's very good. We buy it every time we see it at a thrift store, and we give it away to people, which is probably why we don't have any more copies. You can order it on Amazon. It's very cheap. It's very practical. But anyways, meditation is kind of a two birds, one stone thing. You can get in your scripture for the day and also center yourself for the day and meditate. Some days you'll read scripture and it's just going to have to wash over you. And some days you can sit with it. And you can be mad about it. Like, I remember reading through some Psalms or some portion of the text and being like, this doesn't seem just. You are a just God, but I'm just letting you know how I'm feeling right now. Because God already knows I'm feeling it. I want that transparency. And so I like in this selection of our psalm today where he says, I will meditate on your wondrous works. A lot of times it gives you time to sit with God and just marvel. Jeffrey's gone on prayer walks before during AIM where they would just walk around and take turns they would bring a friend and they would just pray and go on a walk and just notice God's creation and talk to God about God. And that's meditating too. And so that was my main takeaway from this psalm this week. After I read the commentator who said, it is so far from being a tedious repetition of the same things, as may seem to those who look over it cursorily, that if we duly meditate upon it, this psalm, we shall find almost every verse has a new thought and something in it very lively. So, yeah, we have a couple more minutes. I do wonder if anyone in here has a previous experience with Christian meditation on scripture or in prayer. What's something that worked, something that flopped, something you wish you could improve, something, I don't know. The gift given to me was that spiritual disciplines class and learning how to pray through the Bible. But what's been your experience with meditation or not been your experience with meditation?
When I've tried to meditate,
Mhm.
I can make a conscious effort of meditation. It started when I would be making drives by myself, and a lot of times, you just put on the radio, fill up your mind, so you don't have to think,
Yeah.
type of thing. And when I consciously decided I'm gonna take this time to shut everything out, just me, and I'm gonna meditate on the goodness of God.
Yeah.
And speak it aloud. I don't have to be embarrassed, no one else is in the car with me, and, or wherever it might be. And so now, even driving, cause I live almost 8 miles out, a lot of times I'll just shut everything off and just take that 8 miles to meditate on God's goodness.
Mm.
And that helped me, and because we compare ourselves with each other.
Yeah.
We're horrible about doing that, and we're not good enough, we're not in the right headspace, we're not righteous enough, no, we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take that out, because what I've noticed in this psalm, he's not comparing himself to anyone except himself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's desiring that growth, not so he's better than anyone else, but for himself.
Yeah.
And so when I get where I'm not checking a box, okay, I'm gonna, check this box off so I'm a quote-unquote good Christian. That I'm meditating on the Word, so I'm a quote-unquote good Christian. I'm meditating on the Word so that I can grow in my knowledge of
Yeah.
God that Carol's taught on. That I can grow in my love for God, my love for His church, and just trying to take myself out of the equation as
Yeah.
much as you can, because you think you're your best advocate. If you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. And just trying to say that's from Satan. Get that out of my mind. So anyway, those are just some.
Yeah.
When I looked up the word meditate last week for the Psalms, the Bible dictionaries and concordances said it's implied in the word to speak to oneself out loud,
Mm-hmm.
like an actor who's rehearsing his lines,
Yeah.
or like a cow that's chewing cud over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me after seeing that. But that's what we're supposed to be running through our brains on refrain instead of the awful thoughts that we allow to run through
Yeah.
our brains on refrain. But that speaking it out loud, as you said, in your car, is a perfect example of what it even implies in the word itself.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of hard. I feel very intimidated to pray out loud. Like, it's easy to, like, when I'm praying out loud in front of my kids or my family, that makes sense. When I'm alone, like, it's not that it's a performance when it's with my 5-year-old, but I know I'm setting an example when I do that. I'm teaching in that moment. But when I am praying to God by myself, it's not that, and I feel just,
So vulnerable.
yeah, and I feel how large He is, and like how God He is, and I'm just me, and it's really intimidating, and I think Satan delights in that. He delights in my intimidation, and that's how we're weakened. It's not always people at us. It's me criticizing me. It's me tearing me down. The dry spells of my life spiritually have been from me, because there were periods in my life where I was in a very hostile environment and there was no escape. And I thrived spiritually. I was not doing well in my life, but I talked to God every single day. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, but you're the only constant in my life, so I know it must be you. And I remember periods in my life where I would just be crying to God and just begging and just, I don't understand. And I don't do that like I used to, because my life is going better. Like, I'm well, I'm okay. And now it's a lot less natural for me to just talk, and Satan delights in that. And because I know that he delights in it, I push through the awkwardness and do it anyways. Thank you so much for your thoughts today. Y'all have a good day.